this week's program. We're going to be looking at the horticultural scene and see how that season has been. We're also going to do a fair bit on life insurance and whether you need to and how often you need to update it. And also we're going to be having a look at a heifer sale which was held in Rangiora. But in just a moment or two, animal health, prevention and cure. Working dogs and puppies, they're very much overlooked in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep them on the pedestal now and then. We haven't talked about them for a while, and they are, I think, in a lot of ways, the unsung heroes of the farming system, especially traditional Kiwi farming systems that we have. So I think the underpinning of care still, even to this day, is pretty much bound by the importance of adequate nutrition and good parasite control.
So what do we feed them?
So I think in the old days we used to just be the old dog tuckers and that was it. But I think good sound commercial based nutrition, you can't go past it. I think if you are supplementing or you are basing a diet on the dog tucker type scenario on mutton, then it is important that adequate care is given to the preparation of that food. And so that means pretty much either rendering that meat protein and fat at high temperatures, so basically boiling it for a good sound sort of 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes, or freezing. That's going to deactivate tapeworm cysts. So frozen meat for 10 days is going to deactivate any tapeworm cysts. And I think a lot of viewers will probably remember the old days of the dog doses and the dog dosing strips.
Yep.
I think it was a very, very sound system, but I think unfortunately it tended to overemphasise the use of worming drugs over and above just good sound nutrition. So the reality is, if we're not feeding contaminated offal or we're deactivating any tapeworm cysts in the feed that's given, then the cycle can't occur anyway. And so I think the basis of good parasite control in regards to hydatid, false hydatid and sheep measles in particular, which is quite an important issue even to this day, is adequate preparation of homegrown food, or an easy way and to ensure that you've got really good nutrition of your dogs is actually sliding back into a commercially based diet ration rather than going with your homegrown.
Is it enough just to throw them a few dog biscuits, or do you need to have a varied diet?
Okay, so dog biscuits are fine, especially the good ones. It's a fully balanced diet these days. There's usually very, very good feeding recommendations, and there's working dog based formulas. So the energy requirements are all taken care of. It's easy, and really the value of a good working dog, it can't be understated. And so it's easy. It's easy care. You just buy the right ration and feed at the right rate that's documented, and you know that's it. So you don't need to supplement. You don't need to muck around with adding bits here and there, and it's that easy.
Now, puppies, they're a different story.
Yeah, puppies, so they do need different nutritional requirements. It's exceptionally easy to create a situation where the puppy's ratio of calcium to phosphorus in the diet is upset. And so too much calcium in the diet can be detrimental, especially to collie breeds. We end up with lots of developmental diseases. And not enough calcium when compared to phosphorus can also be a problem. So that results in problems with osteoporosis and weak bones. Again, using a commercial-based puppy food is easy, but it can be a trap if you're using homegrown food. If you're just using homegrown meat-based diet, it's exceptionally easy to upset the apple cart in regard to that ratio of calcium to phosphorus, which is so important in the skeletal development of the puppy.
So it's commercial stuff for puppies? Commercial
stuff for puppies, but bear in mind it will be a different formula than what you're using on your adult working dogs. So their nutritional requirements are very different, and I've just mentioned the calcium, the mineral balance needing to be a little bit different, but also energy density and protein levels are also going to be a lot higher than they are even in an adult, very, very active working dog.
How often should we worm them? As in adults, not puppies.
Okay, so as long as we've got the nutrition sorted out and we're pretty sure that we're not going to have a high risk of contamination, or we're making sure we've got good control of our animals and they're not getting into offal, we're controlling access of other dogs onto the property, then actually 3 or 4 times a year is going to be adequate. If you're at a high risk and you think that there are risks of other dogs coming in and messing on the property, or there is, you know, risks of wandering stock, or you've got dog access to fallen stock, well then, you know, perhaps you want to ramp that up to perhaps even as frequently as every 6 weeks, as the old dog control regime was. So it's dependent on the situation. There is, for sheep measles in particular, which I mentioned is still a big issue in regions, there is a blood test available, and so if you are getting high rates of sheep measles in through the works on your abattoir reports or on your freezing work reports, then if you're worried that your own control systems is possibly a little bit lax in the cause of the problem, it's very easy to test your dog's simple blood test, and we can see if those animals have been the source of or contaminated with the appropriate parasite.
What about fleas?
Fleas, big problem. At this time of the year, I don't know why, it's been a really bad year, and I think it's because we've had a little bit of moisture now, and we've still got these quite lovely days, which is putting the humidity levels up, and humidity is what fleas love when it comes to development. And so we are getting quite a lot of flea problems at the moment. Again, really important to make sure you've got good hygienic kennelling, so that means, you know, maybe give the old dog box a bit of a dung out now and then, and make sure that there is an adequate environment. And these days, some of the flea control products, they're really easy. There's one particular one I'm thinking of right now, which is given orally, lasts for 3 months. So it's really easy care and really safe and yeah, very easy, and I don't think there's much excuse not to have good flea control. But don't think it's not going to happen because you're farming in South Canterbury or Otago, and you're not farming up in the Waikato or the Auckland regions, because we still have major flea problems around the Canterbury region as well.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Just a moment, we're going to be talking about a heifer sale held in Rangiora. Tony, a sale for Holstein Friesian heifers, really. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, well, the heifers are the young stock, so they're the future, so that everyone likes the newer genetics, so it seems to be where we managed to attract the interest now. So.
Now, these are all stock that are based around the Canterbury Westland Holstein Friesians?
No, they're from Southland. There's a couple from Southland as well, so we invite anyone that wants to participate in our sale to join us. So there's a couple from the deep south as well.
So tell me about the North American connection, because several of them have got North American blood.
North American connection is the breeders that we've got are very on about the conformation, which is usually the functionality of a cow to try and predict longevity, so they like the top end of that. And North America has been known for quite a long time of having top conformation animals, so these inclined to chase those genetics. They're certainly interested in the high gross per cow production, and so these breeders set that and then market it to the rest of the people that are interested in that.
So I guess performance recording of the mother would be very important.
Yes, that's done with everybody. Is the production of the dam. That's a big part of everything here, but and also part of what we're very interested in is the conformation, the type of the animal, so that she can do that larger production but have the conformation to last longer. You see some of the industry stuff. They are now saying that conformation plays a bigger role in the more intensive operations where the production per cow is higher, and also plays a part in the other extreme, the once a day milkers. They need more conformation as well. So
when you say conformation, what are you actually looking for?
Lots of things. Is that cow can consume large volumes of food to convert to milk. So she
needs springer rib.
So she needs capacity, but she also needs wide muzzle in the lungs and the heart to pump the blood to make the whole thing function. So yes, we want that, and then she needs to have that strength through that rump area to be able to carry herself, and also to be able to do the reproduction and carve out every year. And then legs and feet is fairly important in New Zealand. Cows have got to be able to walk around and consume those feeds rather than it being delivered to her. So they need to have the legs and feet, and then the mammary, which is highly important to be able to functionally get that milk out of that cow, especially if they're doing, large volumes like these cows do.
Is it hard to pick all those points on a young animal?
Well, I guess that's where the pedigree comes into it. We look at the size that have that, and then the dams, and that's a big strength of the sale is looking at the dam, and then the grand dam, and then the great grand dam. And if she's been they're cows that have been able to perform for a number of years, that's really been some of the strength of what the breeders here like selling, and that's the attraction for purchasers to this sale. Is one of the big selling points for us.
And of course, the venue, it's a bit different. The second time you've been here.
Well, yeah, second time we've been here, but we've been to a few venues around Canterbury. It actually started when conference was in Canterbury back in 2005, and we had it at the Chateau, and that was in the hall, and so that was unique, and that started the ball. And then we've had it in the Taitat pub, and then we ended up at Riccarton Racecourse for quite a number of years. We rang the Aura a couple of times, and now, yes, with the conference, the Holstein Friesian Annual Conference in Canterbury last year, some had the idea of coming here, and it seemed to work, so they decided they'd like to come back and do it again. So
Richards Park makes a pretty good sandwich.
Yes, well, there's a few of our local vendors have known Richards Park for quite a while, so there's a little bit of knowing each other helps as well, doesn't it?
Tell me about demand. Does it vary depending what the milk price is doing?
That always has a bearing on what milk price is, yes. Availability of cash always has a big part of any marketing, isn't it?
And so the atmosphere, you're feeling confident in this year's sale?
I think there's been a wee bit of a lift in dairying. The confidence is coming back slowly. It's still in recovery mode, but at least this is, as you said, these are a lot of young ones, so this is the future. So people are investing in the future.
And have people been culling quite hard because of the downturn?
Culling was quite hard through the dairy industry with the downturn, because at the same time beef prices were quite high. So it certainly made the attraction to cull anything that was surplus was certainly was what happened.
It makes these youngsters very valuable as replacements.
Well, we hope so.
500 if you want to. I got 10,000 bids out back. I got 10,000 bids out behind us. 10,000 once, 10,000 twice. Third and final bid. All done at $10,000, and I sell. Done. All done. Very good luck to the buyer. 10,000 was the price tag.
We always talk about the world scene. Where are we at?
Oh, I think the world scene is a little bit as I predicted it was going to be on your program many months ago. Donald Trump obviously got where I expect him to be as president, but I think we're now seeing exactly what I was saying then, that the checks and balances in the US system in terms of the Senate and the House of Representatives, even though they're both Republican, and in point of fact 80 states in America are Republican, 80% of the states in America are Republican, they will not allow him to race off and do lunatic things, as we've seen. No funding for the wall to date, the Obama health care largely thrown out. He's not getting his ways and his promises. Having said that, the American people of his persuasion certainly still love him and revere him and treat him as a god. But I had to chuckle when the night he got elected. The BBC interviewed half a dozen people in both Virginia and in Illinois, and they asked him, do you think that, they asked everyone the same question, do you think that Donald Trump will be able to deliver on the promises? And to a person they said, hell no. They were all Republican voters. Hell no, no president in the last 50 years has ever delivered what he said he was going to do. So why should Donald? So we didn't elect him to deliver on his promises. We elected him to give Capitol Hill a bloody nose, and we've done that. So that's where Brexit is interesting. Prime Minister going to the polls early was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't think she would go. Although I must admit, I've got a lot of time for May. I think she's doing a very good job. But it's interesting to see that as the further we go from when the vote was initially held for Brexit, and the pound sort of dropped out of bed. The pound is firming constantly over the last 3 or 4 months, particularly since February. And I think I'd always been saying that the pound was grossly oversold, and it'll come back to us, and it surely is. But the pound has made people dealing in England, selling to England, exporters selling to England, it's been pretty tough for us for the last few months anyway, because prices that we're set for particularly in our industry for wine, all of a sudden you weren't getting the same amount of money in your New Zealand bank account. On the other side of the coin, since Donald Trump got elected, most exporters from New Zealand in US dollars will be saying, "Oh, hail Trump, you're doing a wonderful job," because the dollar is, US dollar has firmed dramatically against us, and we're down to what, low 68.68. Had got up a year or so ago to 0.8688. So we've come back a huge amount in the space of about 2 years, and particularly since Donald Trump got elected. So yeah, I think a lot of people in New Zealand should be thanking Trump, although to be quite honest, it's actually probably got bugger all to do with him anyway, but it just happens to be happening at the same time.
So exporters are actually starting to get happy. I mean, it'd be lovely to get down to the 50s again.
Oh, of course it would, but they are pretty confident that if it breaks through 0.685, then the next sort of major block is at 0.66, and so it's going down there. And some of the Treasury is still reasonably confident it'll get to 6.2 by the end of the year. But I've heard all those predictions before, and it's so much out of their control. It really is out there. It's what the economy in America is doing, and what the economy in Great Britain is doing, and the EU, and how that relationship is working. But certainly the more important thing that has an effect on the New Zealand dollar is the unemployment rate, or lack of it, in the US, and the amount of money that people are able to save, and the interest they're getting on their savings.
We're still concentrating on going niche rather than commodity. Well, I know you do, but New Zealand as a whole?
Oh, New Zealand as a whole I don't think is. There are a lot of niche players out there, but our major industry is still churning out commodities of a variety that's going to run out of steam remarkably quickly. And I'm talking Fonterra producing whole milk powder. Whole milk powder is a product that is valuable for countries that are developing countries. They've got a poor infrastructure, especially in terms of chillers and being able to move chilled product around and store it in their country. So whole milk powder is brilliant because it's the longest stored version of any milk product. You can store it for months. And hence why we've got a seasonal milking activity in New Zealand where we don't milk in the winter, because you can turn it into whole milk powder during the summer, the spring, the summer, and the autumn, and store it to sell out continuously over the year. But it's a product that the end consumer doesn't actually want. And China is certainly the biggest market for whole milk powder for us, for New Zealand, but they are starting to look more and more and more for fresh milk, be it UHT or whatever it may be. And we're going to be left out in the cold with all these dryers and a heck of a lot of whole milk powder. Yes, Fonterra is changing the batting lineup, and they're producing lots and lots of cheese slices and mozzarella cheese. But the cheese slices are going to the Malaysian hamburger market, and the mozzarella cheese is basically destined for pizza topping in China. That's adding value, yes, but it's not really niche marketing to the retail end, because the consumer doesn't know where the product's coming from anyway. Yes, you're adding more value because you've added more processing to it, but you'd have to make sure that you're adding value and not adding cost.
One of our great diplomats out there as far as New Zealand is concerned, Hayden Paddon, what's happening with him? He's off the pace.
Yes, and it's incredibly frustrating for him. He's having a terrible year, but no different to what Thierry Neuville, the #1 driver for Hyundai, had the beginning of last year. Couldn't score a trick. Came back at the end of the year very, very strong. But I think what is very frustrating for Hayden is that he knows the car is a winning car. Obviously, Thierry has won twice and could have won 4 events this year. It's a very, very quick car, but he is just, for a whole lot of incidents, just not bolting it all together. Like the accident in Monte Carlo was at about 25, 30 kilometres an hour. Tragic result. But it wasn't a fast accident. The car was fine. And the one at Argentina on the weekend, his roll when the car tripped over in a rut in the corner was, again, about the same speed. And they just tipped it back on its wheels and they'd broken a few plastic panels, but that was it. Power steering failed on the car. Well, that just happens. But it just seems to be that's happening to him all the time. And he will bounce back. He is head and shoulders the best New Zealand rally driver and will be for many years to come. He's just got to get out of that funky period. Some of it's not his problem, but it does play on your mind. And I know from a driver's point of view, the worse things are going, the harder you try, and the harder you try often, the bigger the problem. So he's always got to get it right.
We wish him luck.
Cheers.
Thank you very much indeed. Straight after the break, we're going to be talking to Jim Grierson about horticulture and what's been growing well and what hasn't. Jim, the harvest, how's it been?
Well, right from the beginning, Rob, it's been pretty blooming good, good quality, and some fruits and vegetables, the quantity's been down a little bit, but the season's really showing its true colours coming out of an El Nino type weather pattern into a La Nina, and the whole season, even autumn's late, so it's sort of 3 weeks dragging, and it shifted, and it started to show these trends probably the last 5 years. So we've just finished the grape harvest, or just about finished the grape harvest, for instance. Now that's pretty much on time, but to get going, it's shortened up the harvesting period time, and it's done that through all the soft fruits such as strawberries, raspberries, blackcurrants, and then stone fruit came along. Cherries were a bit late; they almost missed the big Christmas opportunity. Raspberries were short because they did miss the Christmas opportunity. Came 7th of January, and there was blooming raspberries all around the place. So, you know, but it didn't defer the fact that it was absolutely good quality fruit coming through. We had a great growing season, actually, funny enough. You know, we've talked about the lack of sun during the summer, and then we did get some heat in, but we got some moisture, and that was critical because we were very, very dry. And we did get some moisture. It was almost a false hope, what we'd call a green summer, where it looks green on top, but it's actually really dry underneath. Now we've had some solid rain throughout the country. You know, Cock came along, Debbie came along, or vice versa, and they've dumped a huge amount of moisture into the ground, which is actually tremendous. It's worth millions and millions of dollars to the primary industry of New Zealand.
Because that's next season's growth.
We'll see the benefit of that over the next 18 months. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Fertilisers have gone into the right place this year for the first time for probably 3 years. And ground conditions were perfect for those applications to take place. So the benefit come September, October, we'll see quite vividly, I would say. But the apple industry is a real success this year. And so is the hop industry. Actually, the hop industry is going very well for a small industry. It's got very good plant breeding behind it, and those the varieties we've got in hops now are really very much leading the charge globally from the boutique beer perspective. So that's pretty exciting for those guys. Albeit a small industry, it's a very well managed industry. But the apple industry, what a success it's been this year. Yes, the pack out's been a little bit, not the pack out, but the tonnage, overall tonnage has been a little bit back, but the pack outs have been just breathtaking, 95, 97%. So there's been very little fruit to go to the factories for juice, as it turns out. So the juice guys are crying a bit, but the exporters and the growers are actually got big smiles on their faces. And it's good quality fruit, and it's going to markets that are quite strong in Europe and especially Asia and parts of America. So a real success story around the apple and pear industry.
How's the wine looking?
Well, the wine industry's had some challenges. Unfortunately, Debbie came through and then Cook followed. And although they were 3 weeks apart, and in between that there were some nice grapes harvested, it did knock around the Sauvignon Blanc especially. I don't like to say that because it'll still be good quality, but the quantity is down, way down, because the fruit split. So a lot of that was left behind. So yeah, it has had a pretty negative effect on the viticulture industry. Although, having said that, Central Otago's had a brilliant time. Quite dry down there, and they've just finished their harvest about last Friday, and they've had a wonderful season. Waipara were challenged a little bit with a Cook rain that we had, but other than that, has had a pretty successful season. Look, there'll be some nice wines out there, but not the quantity that probably the industry was looking for, or the tonnage that we were looking for, because there's no doubt about it, the international demand for New Zealand wines now is just growing, and so is the ability to add some value to that wine stock.
Interesting stickies coming on the market?
Yes, they are. Too right. There's some really nice ones. And this,
Well, it's that sort of season, isn't it?
it is, and it's a type of season. It's a type of wine that people are starting to get used to as either having as an aperitif or probably even a post meal, and just enjoying something quite sweet to finish off with their dessert. And these guys, the winemakers out there, are putting out some beautiful dessert wines, really are late harvest wines.
Are we looking at cleaning up now, though?
We'll start that process. Most of I'm sure the grape growers and what have you will be off for a rest and a bit of a spell. And then, yes, the pruning will start in earnest. We're already managing to get underway with some early pruning and other bush and tree crops. So, yeah, the winter's coming, the snow on the mountains, so everything's going according to plan. Hopefully we'll continue to get moisture through the winter. I think that's quite important. And let's hope we get some nice dry, cold, fresh days to get that pruning done in the right conditions. In terms of vegetable production has been pretty tough especially with the Cook and Debbie coming through. Knocked a lot of vegetables out of the ground. Couldn't harvest them. They rotted. So there's been a bit of a tight supply of lettuce, broccoli, collie, that type of vegetable. Root crops, parsnips, carrots are okay. Potatoes are good, are all being lifted now after the moisture in the ground, coming out pretty blooming well actually. But those brassicas and the fresh greens are certainly been knocked around and have got quite pricey. Immediately the consumer thinks that the grower's making a lot of money. He's not. He's just ploughed in several $1,000s worth of crop that he's hoping to sell. He ain't making much money at all, but it's a real tough business. But they'll come back and they'll get into their winter planting programs now what they're planting now is actually what we're going to be eating in September, October, especially when it comes to brassicas. So their planning is quite long term.
Mother Nature's got a warped sense of humour, hasn't she?
She has, and she always wins, which is quite an interesting thing. I've seen this now for 40 years. But look, the growers have got a lot of resilience, and we are a country that grows very good fruit and vegetables. And I think we've got to be proud of how we present ourselves, not only here domestically, but also from an export perspective.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. In just a moment or two, we're going to be talking to a chap who's a professional cattle groomer. I mean, the cattle all look very well groomed. What's involved? What do you have to do?
Basically starts out with they get a lot of washing done, all nice and clean, and then I go at them with sets of clippers with all different types of length blades on them, just to try and highlight their good points, like the animals that are for sale here today. A lot of the farmers' pride and joy, so they're bringing their best animals out to sell. So it's sort of my job just to make them look as pretty as possible by giving them haircuts and things like that.
Why do you clip them so close to the skin?
With dairy cows compared to beef cows, like dairy cows, they don't put on so much weight or muscle. A lot of their energy goes into making milk, so we clip them nice and short just to show off their bone quality, like the angles that they have with their bone, the levelness they have to their spine. It's just to realistically highlight their dairiness realistically.
And you give them a mohawk right down the centre of the back?
Yeah, we give them a mohawk. In dairy terminology, it's called a top line. So basically the point of that is to level them out so it's nice and straight from a distance. And it just makes them a little more eye appealing. And I've been lucky, the hair here in New Zealand's been really good to work with and wanted to stand up nice and easy. So.
And you do the tail with the tassel at the bottom?
Yeah, we like to fluff the tail right up. It just sort of adds a little more appeal, makes them look a little more fancy and a little more stylish.
Now these are Holstein Friesians. Is it the same for all?
So when I'm clipping different cows, I pretty much clip them the same. Maybe like these are for sale and it's a little cold here or coming into colder times, so I haven't clipped them as short as I would for a show, but for the sale, like that's sort of the standard length we like to clip them with what's called a 502 blade.
So you're a full-time groomer?
Yeah, full-time groomer. It's called a cattle fitter. I've been lucky enough to come across to New Zealand now. I think this is my 6th time, mostly in the North Island, first time in the South Island, but enjoying it a lot. And I've also been lucky enough to go to North America once or twice, and then going back there again for 2 months this year for a couple of big shows.
So how does a young person get involved with doing what you're doing?
Oh, I guess you just really have to have a love of showing cows, and a few people said it's an art, and I think it is nearly an art to try, and you are creating something. You have like a base product, and you can change them in ways by the way you work with the hair and shaping the hair and stuff like that to make them look the best they can, really. And I guess I was lucky enough to get into it. My family's have been fourth generation dairy farmers in North Queensland near Cairns in Australia. In the past 4 years I've been living in Victoria on a stud farm there, Blue Chip Genetics. We've had some really nice show cows, and it's just a passion realistically to work with them. And I guess it's like anything, you just want to try and better yourself all the time at what you're doing. And I think once you stop trying to better yourself, you probably should stop, because there's just, if you're not trying to get better and better all the time, you're probably not enjoying it as much. So I'm lucky enough that I enjoy it and can just try and keep getting better and better.
Are there many people doing it?
Probably as a profession in Australia, there would maybe be a max of 5 people that do it full time throughout the year. But certainly once you get into, say, North America and Canada, like there's certainly a lot more people that do it, just purely because there's a lot more shows and a lot more sales in that area.
Well done, the cattle are looking very impressive.
Thank you very much. Hopefully they all sell very well for their owners today. They've all been tremendous help here at the sales, so thank you very much.
Karen, you're a fix-it-all. Somebody who is having a lot of trouble sleeping.
Yeah, unfortunately insomnia is quite common, but I will say to people, look, there's a couple of reasons why you'll have trouble either getting to sleep or waking in the night. And the first of those is we actually need time to think. But some people don't give themselves time to think. They'll keep busy all day, and they'll even be active relaxers, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you're not giving yourself time to think or time to feel, because emotions aren't bad either, Rob. I've said it many times, emotions are not bad. It's unresolved emotions that cause problems. So we need time to feel and process our emotions so we come out the other side. But some people don't like that processing time. It's like, oh, I don't want to feel this is horrible. Something like grief, for instance, is something that will it takes time to come out the other side. Some things are quicker, some things are longer, like grief. And so we try and avoid that feeling time. Well, we can't avoid it. And it's the same with thinking. We need time to think and process. And if we don't give ourselves that time through the day, guess what? The brain, when you're trying to go to sleep, suddenly goes, oh, now's my time. And all that stuff comes up.
You've been reading my mail, haven't you? Look, I mean, that's exactly the sort of thing, is that I go to bed and then I'm going,
right. So
and I wake up at 3 in the morning and the same thing happens.
So the answer is to deal with that through the day. When I say dealing with it, is even if you give yourself half an hour in the evening to think, just sit there with the TV off, nothing, just think and process, and perhaps write some notes for yourself if you need to, that, all right, I'll deal with this tomorrow, and or feel, then you'll find that your brain doesn't need to bring that stuff up at night.
Okay, because I know people who take sleeping pills and goodness knows what sort of potions to try to get themselves to sleep through.
Well, the problem with that is you're treating the symptom and not the cause. It's like if the oil light goes off, goes on in your car, it's like putting a piece of tape over it so you can't see it. Okay, you want to treat the cause, and the cause is not. So I said there was 2 reasons. The first is that we do need thinking and processing time, and if you don't give it to yourself, it'll happen at night. The second reason is we need feeling time. Now, it's not just about what's going on in our life now, but about the unresolved stuff from the past. And sometimes in our current life, something can trigger unresolved stuff from the past, and it can come up in the night. So finding a way, and of course, as you know, that's what I do, is helping people to process those emotions, whether they're from the past or current. And it's not just emotions, it's beliefs, those negative thoughts, so that they're not interrupting our sleep, because they have a bad habit of doing that.
So things like lack of self-belief, even though we won't admit to it?
Yeah. Not admitting to it, that's a very wise thing for you to say, because a lot of what's coming up in the night is stuff that we're not walking around with consciously in our head, because it's subconscious. So because the subconscious mind is huge, about 95 to 99% of our mind in actual fact. So yes, you say that even though you're not aware of it, and some people might say, look, I've got no worries, there's nothing I'm worried about, there's no reason why I should be not sleeping, but that's because they've been very good at pushing it down. Now, you mentioned self-belief. Yes, if we don't have a good sense of self-belief or self-worth, then we tend to have a negative view of our life going forward, that it's not going to be as good, that we're not going to be as good. And of course, that's a worry. Worry's going to pop up at night.
The other thing is that we're very, very vulnerable when it comes to tall poppy, and we don't stand up and go, I'm good at that.
Yeah, and it's funny when people do, you look at them a bit funny as if to say, oh, they think a lot of themselves, don't they?
Yeah, you instantly go, who do you think he is?
Yeah, we are programmed to think poorly of ourselves, and that has to change. Because when we think well of ourselves, and of course, as you know, that's a large part of what I do with people, helping them to love and accept themselves and have self-worth and feel that they're deserving and worthy. Because when we feel, if you don't feel deserving or worthy or good enough, it's very, very hard to attract a life, because we tend to attract that which matches our thoughts, beliefs and emotions. It's very hard to attract a life that's going to be great when you're not feeling great.
Would that be why this attracting whatever is when you are down, you've got financial problems, the world just implodes onto you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because the more you focus, because you know what worry is, Rob? Worry is focusing on what you don't want. And with law of attraction, the more you're going to attract to you that which matches your vibration. So when you're thinking about what you don't want, i.e. your lack of money, you're actually going to attract more of what you don't want. The only way you can change your life is to change your thoughts, your beliefs and your emotions.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. That's why you need people like me, because it is not easy, you're right.
And you can't do it on your own.
It's pretty hard. You can, but it's pretty hard.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the other thing that happens, I guess, is that you are in a rut and you think, I just cannot see a way clear. I'm in a relationship, or I'm in a work situation, or whatever.
Yes. It'd be interesting how often people say that to me. They'll come and they'll sit down, I haven't met them before, and I'll say, you know, what's brought you here? And they go, I feel stuck. But I can't change anything. And once I get talking, usually they'll say, I don't know why I'm stuck. But as soon as I start asking a few questions and delving down, I find out very, very quickly why it is. Often it's a relationship, but not always. Might be a job or a business. But what I say to people is, look, I'm a rock clearer. Right now, you think that this is the only path you can be on, and you feel stuck because you don't want to be on this path anymore. But in actual fact, there are other paths here, but they're full of rocks. Some of them big, some of them little, some of them gigantic. If I clear those rocks off, and those rocks will be your fears, your doubts, your worries, your thoughts. If I clear those out of the way, then you'll have a choice whether to walk that path or not. So
You actually sort of give the person the strength to move them themselves, though.
I do.
Yeah.
Because lack of self-worth, which you brought up before, can be a big boulder from changing from one path to another. I'm not good enough, I can't do it, it's not going to work. We need to clear all of those things out of the way.
Complicated things, heads, aren't they?
Yes, and emotions are very complicated.
Karen, thank you very much
You're
indeed.
welcome.
Just a moment or two, we're going to be talking about employment and what you can do, what you should do, and how you should do it. For employment agreements, what should we be looking for?
Yeah, with an employment agreement, basically that's the agreement between the employer and the employee, and it outlines all that the employer requires of the employee and what the employee can reasonably expect from the employer in return for working for them.
It's a bit of a minefield. I'm sure that somebody needs to be independent to write it all, because where would we start?
Well, it is. It's like a lot of things, whereby getting it absolutely right so that it's fair for both parties is a hard job. And it needs to be obviously compliant with the current employment legislation, and yeah, like I said, be fair to everyone, and by doing that, everybody knows exactly where they stand. It gives you options should there be some disagreements. It tells you how you step through them, and those sorts of things.
Now, timing?
Timing, you need to get it in place before they start work.
Yeah. Well, that's not all that easy sometimes.
So it is important, because you look at the 90-day period that comes into being. If you actually start work before the employment agreement's signed, that effectively creates some issues around that, legal challenges, should you wish to impose it later on. And so it can make things really difficult. So it needs to be signed before they start work.
By both people?
By both sides.
So, who needs one?
Everybody that is employed. So,
anyone who is
every
employee.
employer that
Employer.
is employing somebody, they need to put an agreement in place. It's a legal requirement, and obviously we're aware that there's a lot of places out there, a lot of small businesses, for example, that their employment agreement tends to be the handshake or just what's spoken about, and there's actually nothing written down. That doesn't meet legislative requirement.
So it's not just an insurance, it's actually a legal requirement.
It is a legal requirement under the Employment Act.
So that's why it's so important.
Well, it's probably is, yeah. It's like most things, like driving down your road, car down the road. You've got to have a driver's license. To be employed, you've got to have an employment agreement. I guess that's a little bit of a similarity there, I guess.
So information that's required?
Information, it'll have the names of both parties. It should outline things around what can be expected if there are challenges in the workplace, who they can go to, for example, if they have a dispute. It should outline what their pay conditions are, what their leave is, and all those elements that are actually integral to being employed by someone. How often are you going to be paid? What are you going to be paid?
With how much tax is going to be withheld?
Yeah, all those sorts of things. And again, you know, it's part of that meeting that legal obligation. And I guess it's part of being a good employer, which is what the Act indicates as well, you know, is that being fair, it's being open and transparent about what's happening in the workplace. If it's written down in a nice, concise document, everybody knows exactly where they stand, and hopefully there's no disputes out of it.
I was going to say, to me it's a bit like a prenuptial, because, you know, of course I love you, darling, but I want you to sign this to say, you know, but it's a prenuptial, because nobody goes into a relationship thinking it's going to blow to bits.
Well, no, that's right, and it's and I suppose, you know, it's that old synergy about, you know, failure to plan on my part does not make an emergency on you know, exactly. At all, you know. It's or failure to plan is a plan to fail.
Let's have a look at the recruitment system.
Yep.
What's involved with that?
Okay, with recruitment, obviously you're looking to gain a new employee into your business. So part of that is before you even start the process, what does the job entail? What is the position that you're trying to recruit to? And as an employee, you need to understand that. The details of the job. What are the tasks that are to be carried out? So from that, you would develop a position description that outlines what the job is. Once you've decided on that, then you look at, okay, we've got this job here, what does it measure up with by way of perhaps remuneration and pay for the individual? And then from that, you would look at the employment agreement based on that, understanding what the position actually is. Because if you don't understand the position, you actually don't know what you're hiring for.
So, okay, so that opens the door of somebody saying, well, I've got you in here as a tractor driver, but I now want you to run the irrigation. And that's not part of the employment agreement.
Right, and again, most position descriptions and agreements will have a phrase around the lines of any other duties that may be required.
Within reason.
Yeah, and again, that's within reason. It's not suddenly bringing them in as a labourer and putting them in as a general manager and expecting not to pay any more, for example, or vice versa. So yeah, again, it's about being really clear so that people know what the position is, and then once they've determined that, obviously then building the employment agreement around what the position is, and from there going forward advertising in accordance with what you're looking for, and then going through the selection process based on that.
I want you to come back because I want you to tell me how you can help out with that selection process,
yeah.
And also how you can wade in and actually take all the minefield bit out of when it does go belly up. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We're back with more On the Land in just a moment or two. Tell you a wee story. My late stepfather died, and we found an insurance policy that he'd had when he got married, which was over 50 years before. And there wasn't much to it. Is that the sort of thing that does happen?
Yeah, it does. the policies have changed over the years. So some of those old policies had a value at the end of them over a certain period of time, and for those they've basically after a long period of time convert more into an investment type policy because there's a value at the end of it. That's changed over the years, and now we have life insurance, which is really what we call term life insurance. So it is basically paid out on death, basically.
Yep.
Funny thing, we call it life insurance. In fact, it's actually death insurance. so some of those policies that have been sitting in the cupboards for 50 years or whatever are probably at some stage reasonably valuable and probably shouldn't be touched. But one of the things we need to understand about insurances is the need, where there's a need. Life insurance itself is a very simple product. Someone dies and someone gets paid. It's really easy product. What's difficult about it is who gets paid, when, and how much. And that changes throughout our lives. The need and our circumstances and our positions within life changes. For life insurance to be a necessity, essentially we need what we call the 2 Ds, which is debt and dependence, or dependence and or. If you have both, there is a real definite need for life insurances because your death has an impact on dependents and the debt that's left for those dependents. So there is a real need. As we get older, that need changes. Our dependents grow up, leave home. Believe it or not, they do.
Never leave your wallet, but they do leave home.
That's exactly right. But so does our debt change. You know, we take a mortgage out when we're younger for our home and we pay that off over a period of time, and our circumstances change. So as our dependents and as our debts change, so should our insurances, our life insurance. If we don't have any debt, don't have any dependents, we probably don't need any life insurance or very little. But we may need other insurance because we don't have people to look after us if we're ill or infirmed.
So Barbara Lee, that opens another door, doesn't it? That's the terminal illness one that you guys talk of?
Yes, that's right, and that's the thing, I mean, products are being developed all the time, new products, and the products ranges are improving to the policy wordings, and it's really important that you have the most up-to-date policy wording so that your outcome at claim time is going to be most successful.
So that means the endowment policy that you were sold when you were first married or 50 years ago is probably not really worth the paper it's written on.
Well, that has to be analysed properly, but the new types of covers coming through, as you say, the need for life insurance becomes less over time, and it becomes more about what do I need for myself rather than leaving money behind. So this new terminal illness cover, for example, that pays out for you as a person if you're diagnosed with a terminal illness and likely only had 12 months to live. And it's a bucket of money for you to go and do the things that you've always wanted to do while you can. And it's about a third of the price of life covers. So, to have access to these types of covers, this is where it's great to get together and just to go over what you've got, and we can recommend these types of covers depending on your circumstances.
So Hank, you're looking at a farmer who doesn't have any debt or dependence because he's passed the farm on. But a terminal cover will mean that if he gets terminal illness, that pressure doesn't come onto the farm income.
Correct. So it's and again it depends on a lot of external circumstances surrounding that. Does he have somebody to look after him? Is his wife still there? Is she able to do that or help with that? There's a whole raft of...
Or the other way around,
the other way around, as the case may be. Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on a whole lot of ancillary situations that encompass a particular person to see what sort of insurances they need. You need to understand that insurance itself is just a funding mechanism for what you want to happen in a certain event. In some cases, it's been described as pre-arranged funding. If you need money, where do you go? The bank. The bank will only lend you if it's a good risk.
Yeah,
and it's not a good risk when things are going wrong. So what insurance is, it's a pre-arranged funding in the event that something goes wrong. The amount of funding is dependent upon the circumstances and what the client wants to happen if things go wrong.
And the trouble is, if something does go wrong, that's when income sort of, can stop or be severely reduced and your expenses go up, because you've got all these medical expenses, to get a taxi to the hospital or whatever is required. So it becomes this huge imbalance and it becomes very difficult. So with us putting funding there, that's the whole idea, is to take away all of that financial pressure so that you can cope with what you're, having to cope with.
Barbara, who do you want sitting around the table when you discuss things like terminal cover?
Oh, the
whole family.
Well, yes, that's right. The whole family. We look at children. These things happen unfortunately every day, and what we're wanting people to do is just put a plan in place. We don't want them to ever have to use it, but if they do have to use it, then we've got a good plan there for them.
Because it's all about farm succession, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and that depends entirely upon what succession plan you want to happen, and the cost that's around that, and the timing around that. So what happens today may be quite different from what may happen in 5 years' time, or even in 2 years' time. There might be completely different circumstances, and that's why insurances need to be regularly reviewed. I should say there should also be a balance between need and affordability. Mm-hmm. We can give as much insurance as you like, but there's no point in doing that if it's not affordable, if it doesn't come within budget. So there has to be a balance between need and affordability.
Is there a rule of thumb that you can sort of say, advertising, they say between 5 and 10% of turnover. Is there a sort of a rule of thumb, or is it totally page by page?
Yeah, no, I don't think you can put a rule of thumb on it. It's dangerous to do that, because then you give clients a false impression of where they're at. We help them identify circumstances that they're in, and then help them identify on what they want to happen should a certain event take place.
Best time to buy is like a tree. You either plant a tree 20 years ago or today.
Well, yeah, that's, when it's a chicken and egg thing. When it's we know that when we're younger, we're more likely to be injured or infirmed as a result of an accident. But when we get to our age, it's that does a complete flip, and we're more likely to be affected through an illness or an ailment, or our body's wearing out. Yep. So there's a change in circumstances, a change.
Hence the reviews.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you both very much indeed. Listen, if you'd like to recap on what they've just been saying, or anything else that's been on the program this week, check our website. It's ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.